Audiobook Introduction. To Save Her Lord, a novel of Ancient Rus, by Anna Gogoleva. Welcome, listener. Step into the frozen heart of Ancient Rus, a land where winter is not merely a season, but a living presence. A land of vast, snow-choked forests, half-frozen rivers, and the ever-present whisper of old gods and spirits that dwell just beyond the reach of candlelight. Before you hear the first word of this tale, you must understand the world into which you are about to descend. It is a world where the boundary between the mortal realm and the realm of magic is as thin as the ice on Lake Chud. At the core of this story lies the rich, untamed spirit of Slavic folklore, a mythology as deep and ancient as the forests themselves. For the people of this time, the Christian faith was a new cloak worn over older, more primal beliefs. The forests were not empty. They were ruled by Leshy, the master of the forest, a shaggy, moss-covered giant who can appear as a man, a beast, or a tree. He is the guardian of the wild, capricious and powerful. He does not bow to princes or priests. He answers only to the ancient laws of nature. And in this book, Varvara must earn his trust, not with a sword, but with a healer's gentle hand. Beneath the frozen rivers lurks Vodyanoi, the old man of the deep. He is a creature of silt and algae, with eyes like bottomless wells and fingers cold as death. He is greedy, angry, and hungry. He represents the unforgiving power of water, a power that drowns the careless. But even he, as old as the river stones, can be moved by a simple offering of bread and a kind word. And then there is Baba Yaga, perhaps the most famous figure of Slavic myth. She is not a simple witch. She is the bone-shaking, iron-toothed keeper of the threshold between life and death, between the known world and the world of spirits. Her hut stands on chicken legs, turning to face whoever approaches, and she tests all who seek her aid. She does not give power freely. She demands service, humility, and courage. But to those who prove themselves worthy, she offers weapons forged by the earth itself. Throughout the journey, Varvara will also encounter the Beast Council, the cunning fox, the swift hare, and the far-seeing hawk. In Slavic tradition, animals are not mere brutes. They are wise beings, sometimes shapeshifters, always messengers of the forest. They speak in riddles, and they remember kindness. All of these spirits are born from the ancient Slavic belief that the world is alive, that every tree, river, and stone has a soul, and that humans must walk with humility, asking permission, offering thanks, and never taking more than they need. Into this world of living myth steps our heroine, Varvara, a healer's daughter. She is not a warrior princess with an army at her back. She is a woman armed only with herbs, old incantations, and a love so fierce it defies the icy grip of death itself. When her husband, the voivode Dobrynya, marches to the infamous battle on the ice, the historic clash of 1241 against the Teutonic knights, she is left behind to wait. But wait she will not. A vision in the mirror shows her his fall, and so she cuts her hair, dons his clothes, and walks alone into the forest of shadows. To save her lord, she must earn the protection of the spirits, outrun the wolves, and face the ironclad armies of the West. This is a tale of historical grandeur and mystical wonder. It is a story about the power of mercy over violence, and of love as the greatest spell of all. So draw your wolfskin cloak tight against the cold. The wind is rising, the snow is falling, and the forest is waiting for you. Let us begin. To Save Her, Lord, a novel of Ancient Rus. Prologue. The Eve of Kolyada. Winter solstice, 1240. The wind howled that night in a voice that belonged to no living thing. It crept through the chinks between the logs of Varvara's izba, stirring the dried bunches of wormwood that hung beneath the rafters like inverted brooms. The candles in their brass holders trembled and danced as though they possessed souls of their own, casting wild shadows across the walls where bearskins hung and ancient icons watched with painted eyes. Beyond the single window lay an endless field, buried in snow to the very horizon. The forest at its edge stood black and shaggy, like a crouching pack of wolves waiting for nightfall to descend upon the world of men. No stars shone. The moon was a ghost, barely visible through the iron clouds that pressed down upon the earth like the lid of a coffin. Varvara sat by her spinning wheel, but her hands did not move. The spindle had stopped. The thread was broken. She stared out the window, trying to discern something in that white void. A rider, perhaps, or a bird, or even the distant glow of a village fire. But she saw only herself, her reflection in the dark glass, a pale face framed by heavy dark braids, and eyes that her mother had called wolf eyes for that strange, almost luminous green shimmer they held in the gloom. My light, she thought, and the words were a prayer. Where are you now? Have you reached Novgorod? Or have you stopped at some roadside tavern, so crowded and noisy that you can forget a young wife waits at home, her heart growing heavier with every passing day? 3 weeks had passed since Dobrynya had left. 3 long, bitter weeks, when every day seemed longer than the last, and every night stretched into an eternity of cold and silence. She knew she should not be afraid. He was a boyar of the prince's senior Dobrynya, a voivode, a man whom enemies feared and his own men respected. He had survived 100 battles. He had killed more men than she had ever known. He was strong, cunning, and blessed by both the old gods and the new. But the heart is a foolish bird. You cannot lock it in a cage, nor reason with it. Varvara! A bright voice called from outside, shattering the silence like a stone through ice. Open up! We've come to tell fortunes! It was Stepanida, the blacksmith's wife, merry and reckless, with a laugh that could fill a church and a tongue that could cut glass. And with her came 2 more girls, the elder's daughters, rosy-cheeked from the frost and the thrill of anticipation. All 3 burst into the izba, bringing with them the scent of snow, horse sweat, and burnt sugar. They had clearly already visited the village sorcerer for charcoal. Fortune-telling? Varvara smiled, though the smile came tight across her face. Tonight is the eve of Kolyada, the very night for such things. Exactly! Stepanida tossed off her fur coat and sat down at the table, rubbing her frozen hands together with the energy of a woman who had not yet learned the meaning of stillness. To see one's betrothed, that is the night for it. Last year I saw my Kuzma in the mirror, and here he is, alive and well, snoring beside me, even if he yells in his sleep like a scalded cat. And you, my lady, would you not wish to see your boyar? The younger girls giggled, their eyes bright with the fever of forbidden things. Fortune-telling was a sin, the priest said, a wicked practice that opened doors best left closed. But the old ways held, as they always held, in the blood and bone of the people. Varvara meant to answer something like, "Why should I tell fortunes when I already know him?" But the words stuck in her throat like dry bread. Something cold and slimy, like fish scales, clutched at her chest. A premonition. A warning. She felt the weight of unseen eyes upon her, the pressure of something vast and ancient pressing against the thin membrane between worlds. She already knew she would agree. Something was pulling her toward the dark water of mirrors and candles, something that could not be called anything but a summons. "Bring the mirrors," she said quietly, "and candles, beeswax." The girls bustled about with the frantic energy of conspirators. They closed the shutters tight, bolting them so even the moon could not peer in. "Else you see not the one you need, but the one you do not," Stepanida warned, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. Varvara took from her chest 2 large mirrors, Venetian, foreign, gifts Dobrynya had brought her from Pskov, where the merchants from the west came with their silks and their glass and their strange, secretive gods. The mirrors were smooth as black water and so deep that you felt, if you gazed too long, you would fall into them and never find your way out. "Set them opposite each other," commanded Stepanida, who was the chief among the girls in matters of divination, "so that one reflects in the other. Candles on either side, and not a single draught." The mirrors were placed, the candles were lit. Varvara sat between them, gazing into that dark infinity that opened between the reflections. The light drifted, flickered, turned into globes, and those globes were drawn into the depths of the glass like stars into a black abyss of sky. She could feel the cold radiating from the mirrors, a cold that had nothing to do with winter, a cold that came from somewhere else entirely. "Whisper his name," breathed one of the elders' daughters, frightened and entranced at once. "Whisper it 3 times, without looking away, and you shall see." Varvara opened her mouth. The candle flame shuddered, though there was no wind, no draught. "Dobrynya." The name hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water. "Dobrynya." The light in the mirror began to change. It swirled into a funnel, a vortex that sucked the warmth out of the izba, carrying away the scent of wax and women's breath. The girls behind her fell silent. Only the crackling of the fire and the beating of her heart could be heard, too loud, too fast. Dobrynya. The vision that rose before her was not what she had expected. Instead of her husband's face, the face she knew to every tiny wrinkle at his eyes and every scar on his temple, she saw ice. Endless, dirty white ice beneath a grey sky that had no end and no beginning. On that ice, in the very centre, stood men in armour, formed into a wedge. Mounted knights on heavy horses, wearing iron masks with slits for eyes, red crosses on white cloaks. They were like living idols, like monsters forged from iron and cruelty and the cold certainty of their own righteousness. And among them, Dobrynya. He knelt on the ice, clutching the broken shard of a sword. His face was drenched in blood, his eyes turned skyward, and his lips moved as though he were whispering her name. Directly before him, a knight on a black horse, raising his blade for the final blow. "No!" Varvara screamed so loudly that the candles went out. She struck the mirror with her hand. The glass shattered, exploding into 1,000 fragments that scattered across the floor like tears frozen into crystals. The girls shrieked and recoiled, covering their faces, their festive excitement turning to terror. Varvara stood there, breathing hard. Her palm was cut. From the deep wound, blood welled up, dripping onto the white, snow-like shards. The blood was black in the dim light, a stark contrast against the pale floor. "What did you see, my lady?" whispered Stepanida, pale as death, her earlier bravado entirely gone. Varvara raised her eyes. In those eyes burned not just fear, but resolution. "I saw my husband," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. Falling. And I will go after him, to the end of the earth, into the very inferno, if need be. Book 1, The Northern Falcon. Chapter 1, The Hall of Warriors. 1 year earlier, autumn 1240. He burst into her izba like a wounded, angry bear. Varvara had heard his footsteps a verst away, heavy, unsteady, with the metallic jingle of spurs on frozen ground. She was not afraid, though in these parts, on the very outskirts of the village, visitors were rare. The road to her house was overgrown with weeds, and the path to the well was known only to Varvara and the old dog sleeping by the threshold, his muzzle grey with age. But this step was the step of a warrior. She knew it even without looking out the window. There was a certain weight to it, a certainty, the rhythm of a man who had spent his life walking toward danger rather than away from it. When he threw open the door, letting in a blast of cold and the smell of blood, Varvara stood by the stove with a pot of hot water. She already knew what would be needed. She had seen it the moment his foot crossed the threshold, as clearly as if the spirits had whispered it in her ear. Before her stood a voivode, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face carved from stone, harsh cheekbones, a nose that had been broken at least once, deep-set eyes that regarded the world with suspicion, accustomed to gauging the distance to an enemy. His dark hair was streaked with grey at the temples, and his beard was thick and unkempt, as though he had not paused for grooming in many days. But his right arm, with which he clutched his bloodied cloak, hung uselessly at his side, and from under the mail-coat, torn at the shoulder, dark blood seeped in a steady, alarming flow. Gods above, she thought, her healer's eye already cataloguing the damage. That is a deep wound, a sword probably, and it has been festering. Goyesi, mistress, he said, bowing his head slightly, and his voice came hoarse, strained. Did you expect a guest? Forgive my intrusion, but the wound. Varvara, without a word, set the pot on the table and pointed to the bench. Sit. Take off the mail. He smirked, though the smirk carried pain. You are bold, woman, or foolish. A voivode comes and you command like a princess. A princess may not command the way a healer does, she answered, pulling out a box of dried herbs from under the bench. Take it off, unless you wish to keep that arm, or do you no longer need it? The mockery in her voice was audacious. Men usually did not tolerate that, especially men like him of the senior Dobrynya, covered in glory and scars, accustomed to bows and the deference of lesser men. She expected anger, perhaps even violence. She had seen it before, in wounded warriors who could not bear to be reminded of their mortality. But he did not grow angry. On the contrary, he looked at her carefully, studying her with those deep-set eyes that seemed to weigh everything they saw. So that's how it is, he said, unbuckling the straps on his shoulder with his good hand. You are a fighter, I see. Or am I mistaken? You are not mistaken, she said simply, soaking dry plantain leaves in the water. But give me your arm. Do not delay. He stripped off the mail, and Varvara saw the wound. It was deep, jagged. Someone had struck him with a sword, without sparing strength, and it was only luck that the blade had slid along the bone rather than severing the tendon. The blood had clotted, forming a crust, but beneath it the flesh was swollen and burning hot. Infection was setting in, the red tendrils of it already creeping up toward his shoulder. 3 days, she thought, at least 3 days since he was wounded. He has been riding with this, the fool. What is your name, voivode? She asked, carefully touching the edge of the wound with her fingers. He winced but stifled a groan. Dobrynya, son of Vsevolod, boyar of the princes Grinitsa. And you? Varvara, daughter of Agrafena the healer. Many months now since my mother passed to the other world. I remain alone. Alone? He raised an eyebrow, surveying her izba, poor but clean, with bunches of herbs hanging under the rafters and a small lamp burning before the icon of the Virgin. Such a woman, alone, in the forest. The wolves give me a wide berth if I do not call them. And people, she smiled thinly, almost invisibly, people come when they need help, or when they are in pain. You, Dobrynya, came because you are in pain. He was about to reply, but at that moment she applied a poultice of St. John's wort and honey to the wound. He hissed through his teeth, his arm jerking, and his strong hand seized her wrist with surprising force. Careful, he breathed. That is fire. Fire heals, she replied, not trying to pull away. You know that, voivode. Or do you only know how to strike with a sword, not how to heal? They looked at each other. A long, heavy moment, as if time itself had frozen, like the water in a well in winter. Varvara saw something shift in his dark, deep eyes. Anger giving way to surprise, then to interest, and finally to something else entirely. Something she had not expected to see in the eyes of a warrior who had just ridden for 3 days with a festering wound. And for the first time in her life, she looked at a man without looking away. He was like an old oak, ancient, powerful, scarred all over. And from him emanated the solidity that draws one so strongly in this world. The certainty of a man who knows who he is and what he is meant to do. He was the first to lower his gaze, smiling with the corners of his mouth. You know, girl, he said softly, you are the first person who has not been afraid of me. Even the men in the Dobrynya fear me when I am angry. But you are like the wind, a warm, northern wind. One can never tell what to expect from you. Do not try to understand me, she replied, binding the wound with clean linen. Just stay close and trust. He sighed, and that sigh was deep, like the exhalation after a long battle, when victory is already yours and you can finally rest. Perhaps that is why I came to you, he said. I do not know how I found the path. The road to your house is hidden, and I have never been to this village before. But I walked here as though someone were leading me, as though a thread had been tied to my heart and pulled. And now, see, I have met a woman who speaks to me as an equal. And I, Varvara, am used to people bowing and trembling before me. Then, Dobrynya, she raised her gaze to his, you have wasted your time on those who tremble, because trembling is only for the prince and for God. For love, there is only an equal. He grabbed her hand, hard, so that she cried out. For love, he repeated, and his voice was rough. What do you mean? That you will come again tomorrow, she said, not trying to free her fingers. And the day after. You will bring me firewood, though I have not asked. And soon, Dobrynya, we will no longer speak of wounds and pain. We will speak of other things, and you know it. He looked at her for a long time, then slowly released his grip, stroked her palm, stiff from his grasp, and smiled. Goyesi, Varvara, he said, now softer, almost a whisper. You will be the ruin of me. Only if you allow it, she answered. The next day he did come. He brought wood, though she had not asked, a whole cartload from the river lowlands where he had found dry driftwood, already cut and split, as though he had spent the entire morning preparing it. He stacked it by the woodpile with the efficiency of a man who had done such work 1,000 times. And then he stood there, looking at her as though he wished to say something important but hesitated. "Does your arm hurt?" she asked, peeking out from behind the door. "It hurts," he admitted, "but I bear it." "Patience is not always a virtue," she said, stepping into the entryway and taking his hand. "Sometimes it is simply foolishness. Come, I will change the dressing." He followed her obediently, like a bear following its tamer. Later, as she crouched before him and re-wrapped his shoulder, he remarked, "You have gentle hands, Varvara. Soft. But it is strange. A healer's hands are always calloused, from roots, from herbs. Yours are like a boyarina's." "Because I know how to work," she replied, without looking up. "I do not use force. The forest loves me, and the herbs give themselves freely. I only ask." "Ask?" he frowned. "You speak with them." "And you speak with your horse?" She lifted her eyes. "With your horse, with your sword, with your hound, you speak. And I speak with the trees and the wind, and they answer. That is my gift, Dobrynya. Do you mock it?" "No," he said seriously. "I never mock what I do not understand. But, Varvara, tell me, if you are so bound to this world, to this forest, why did you not enter a convent? Why not become a nun? Give your gift to God." "Because God gave me this gift to use it, not to hide it," she answered simply. "And also because I wish to love, with living, passionate, human love. Not to pray to cold icons, but to warm someone with the heat of my body. Do you understand, Dobrynya?" He was silent, so long that she was about to rise and leave, thinking she had offended the voivode. But suddenly he raised his good hand and touched her cheek, uncertainly, like a boy touching a girl for the first time, not like the warrior he was. "I understand," he said. "And, Varvara, if you wish to love, I wish it too. And I think I have found the one worth trying with." She stood up, straightened, and took his palm in hers. "Then, voivode," she said with a smile that lit up her face, "do not delay, for time is short, and we are fewer by the day." Chapter 2. The Wedding Feast. The wedding was celebrated in the prince's grindnitsa, a great hall whose walls were hung with bearskins and wolf pelts, whose rafters were black with the smoke of 1,000 fires. Along the long tables sat the druzhina, the boyars, and their wives, all in their finest attire, furs, brocade, silver circlets upon their heads. In the corner, a horn filled with mead hummed its deep note, and maidens in white tunics sang melancholy wedding songs, weaving together pagan longing and Christian hope in a melody as old as the land itself. Varvara sat in the place of honour, beside Dobrynya. She wore a gown of heavy red silk, embroidered with golden thread, a gift from the prince's wife. In her hair, a wreath of dried corn ears and living juniper twigs, which she had woven herself, having made a pact with the old forest the day before. She felt the weight of the eyes upon her, the whispers of the women who wondered at this strange healer who had captured the heart of a voivode. Dobrynya wore his mail over a festal shirt, and his sword hung at his side, not for battle but for ceremony, the blade polished until it shone like water. He looked at her with tenderness hidden behind a stern warrior's mask, but she saw how the warmth glimmered in the corners of his eyes, meant only for her. "Drink, wife," he said, handing her a horn ornamented with silver. "Drink so that your husband may be strong, and your house full." She drank, and the mead burned her throat with its sweet fire. When she had finished, she broke the wedding loaf, baked in the oven under the full moon as tradition demanded, and placed a piece in her mouth. The taste was strange, astringent, and at the same time salty, as though someone had added tears to the dough. They will be bitter years, she recalled her mother's words, whispered on the day of her death. But if love is strong, the bitter will become sweet. Dobrynya leaned close and whispered in her ear, "Why are you so pensive? You have scared all the boyars, sitting there like a statue." "I'm thinking of the future," she answered, "of what awaits us." "War awaits us," he said directly, without concealment. "I know it. The prince is preparing. The Livonians are already approaching Pskov. There will be a battle, Varvara, a great battle." "And you will go?" "I will go. I'm a voivode, wife. My place is on the battlefield." She placed her palm on his arm, pressing her fingers into the mail. "I know, and I do not hold you, Dobrynya, but know this, you have a home, you have me, and I will wait." He cupped her face in his hands, lifted it and looked into her eyes. "I will wait for you too," he said. "And if something happens, know that I love you, Varvara, as no one has ever loved and no one ever will." She smiled, and in that smile was so much light that even the stern boyars at the other end of the hall seemed to smile back, and the maidens paused in their song for a moment. "Enough sorrow," she said, rising. "We are at a wedding, voivode. We shall dance." The dancing lasted until midnight. Varvara whirled about the hall, and after her whirled the spirits of the forest, invisible, but she felt their presence. Leshy stood in the corner, arms crossed, nodding approvingly. Vodianoi, hidden beneath the floor where the barrels of mead stood, splashed softly, making a merry gurgling that no one heard but her. Even Baba Yaga, it seemed, was there, her bony foot tapping in time with the music, though no one saw her behind the backs of the dancers. As the evening waned, when the guests began to depart and the candles burned low, Varvara and Dobrynya found themselves alone. He removed her wreath, loosened her hair, and she smelled of pine and juniper, of forest and evening mist. "Are you not afraid, Varvara?" he asked, brushing his lips against her neck. "Of what tomorrow may bring?" "I fear only one thing," she answered, embracing him, "that we will have too little time together. But I will teach you to fight this world, Dobrynya. I will show you how to be strong, even when all are against you." "Teach me," he whispered. "I am listening." Chapter 3. The Prince's Command. January 12, 41. The winter was savage. Snow fell in such thick layers that horses sank to their bellies, and even the wolves did not howl at night. They crouched in their dens, tails tucked, waiting for the white hell to subside. The village was buried, the paths between the izbas reduced to narrow trenches that had to be dug anew each morning. The old women said it was the worst winter they could remember, and the old men nodded and said nothing, their eyes full of the memory of other winters, other hungers. Varvara sat by the window, watching the snow-covered path that led from her house to the prince's manor. Dobrynya had gone to the prince's council, and she knew the command had already been given. She felt it in the way the wind changed direction, bringing the scent of iron and distant battles, in the way the village dogs barked anxiously, in the way the birds flew south, though spring was still far off. Something is coming, she thought, her hand going to her chest where the amulet she had given him used to hang. Something terrible. And he will be at the centre of it. The door burst open and Dobrynya flew in, not even removing his snow-covered cloak. His face was grim, and she read the news upon it before he could speak. "Pskov has fallen," he said without greeting. "The Livonians have entered the city. Prince Alexander is gathering the army, We march in 3 days. To Lake Chud. There will be battle. I knew, she said quietly, rising from the bench. I was waiting for it. He came to her, clenching his fists. Varvara, I must go. You understand? I understand, she said, embracing him. I have always understood. I am the wife of a voivode. I am ready. Ready? He pulled back, searching her eyes. You are not ready, Varvara. No wife is ever ready for her husband not to return. Will you wait? Will you sit by the window, watching the road? I will, she said firmly. I will wait, and if you do not return, I will go and find you. To Lake Chud, to the devil's own jaws. I will go, Dobrynya. I will not let you pass into the other world without me. He gripped her shoulders with such force that she nearly cried out. I love you, he said through his teeth. Do you hear me, Varvara? I love you as one loves only once in a lifetime. If I fall, live. Live long and happily. It will be easier for me to go knowing you are alive. Do not go, she whispered. Promise me you will return. I cannot promise, he said. But I will try. I will try to come back to you. On the day before his departure, she prepared him for the road. She packed his belongings with care, dried meat, hard bread, a change of linen. She rewrapped the hilt of his sword with fresh leather soaked in a tincture of wormwood for protection against evil forces. She checked every link of his mail, every strap of his armor. And then, when all was done, she hung around his neck an amulet, a mandrake root, dried and braided with a wolf's fang, wrapped in a piece of birch bark on which she had scratched ancient symbols with her mother's knife. Wear this, she said. Do not take it off, even in battle. It is your protection, Dobrynya. It is I, always with you. He kissed the amulet, pressing it to his lips. Thank you, wife. Now I shall go into battle with greater courage. On the night before his leaving, they lay in bed, and she whispered ancient incantations, learned from her mother in the long winter evenings of her childhood. The words were old, incomprehensible even to herself, yet they carried power, the same power that flowed in the veins of forest and water, in the blood of the earth itself. Churme, churme, she whispered, touching his forehead. Let arrows pass you by. Let swords slide off your mail. Let your heart beat steadily, your breath unbroken. And if it grows hard, call me. I will hear you, Dobrynya. I always hear you. He took her hand and kissed her fingers. How do you do it? He asked. How do you feel me from afar? I do not know, she admitted. It is a gift or a curse. But I feel you, Dobrynya. I feel your heartbeat now. It is faster than usual. Are you afraid? No, he said. I fear only for you. Do not fear for me, she smiled in the darkness. I am stronger than you think, and I will teach you this strength. If you return, Dobrynya, I will show you how to hear the forest, how to breathe with the wind, how to see beneath the water. But first, return. He kissed her on the lips. I will return. I swear by God and by Perun, I will return. At dawn, when the sky was still grey and the frost lay white upon the ground, Dobrynya rode away. He stood in the doorway, already on horseback, fully armed with a spear in his hand, and he looked down at her from the height of his saddle. The light caught his face, and she saw him as she would remember him, strong, proud, burnished with the cold fire of the winter sun. Wait for me, Varvara, he said. I will return when the ice melts. When the ice melts on Lake Chud, she said, touching his stirrup, I will wait. And he rode off, leaving behind only the tracks of his horse in the snow, quickly covered by the wind. Varvara stood on the porch, and tears froze upon her cheeks, turning into icy tracks. "Return," she whispered into the emptiness. "Return, my light, or I shall come after you." Book 2. The Forest of Shadows. Chapter 4. The Pursuit. Varvara waited 3 days. 3 days of staring at the white road, at the empty horizon, at the tracks that the wind had long since erased. 3 days of listening to the silence, the terrible, crushing silence that had fallen over the village since the men had marched away. The women wept quietly in their izbas. The children played with sticks, pretending they were swords. And the old grandmothers sat by the stoves, muttering prayers to gods both old and new. On the 3rd night, she dreamed of him again. She saw the ice, that same endless, dirty white ice. And she saw Dobrynya on his knees, his sword broken, his face turned toward the grey sky. And in the dream, he spoke to her. His lips moved, and she heard his voice as clearly as if he stood beside her. "Varvara, I am waiting. Do not leave me here." She woke with a cry, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding like a war drum. The izba was dark. The fire had burned low, and the cold crept in through the walls. She sat up, her hand going to her chest, where the amulet she had given him used to hang. It was gone now. She had given it to him, and she felt its absence like a hole in her soul. But in its place, she felt something else, a pull. A thread, thin as spider silk, stretching from her heart across the frozen land, toward the north, toward the place where the ice lay thick and the armies gathered. She knew then what she had to do. By dawn, she had made her preparations. She packed a small bundle, dried meat, a leather flask of water, a pouch of herbs, zveroboi for wounds, podorozhnik for infection, pollen for protection against evil. She took her mother's old knife, its blade worn thin by years of cutting roots and stems, and tucked it into her belt. She took a heavy cloak of wolfskin, dark and thick, that would keep her warm even in the deepest frost. And then she took the clothes. They were Dobrynya's, a worn tunic, a leather jerkin, thick woolen trousers. She had kept them after he left, sleeping with them wrapped around her pillow, breathing in the scent of him, sweat and pine and iron. Now she pulled them on, one by one, over her own undergarments. They were too big, but she cinched the belt tight, rolled up the sleeves, and looked at herself in the small bronze mirror. A boy stared back at her. A thin, dark-haired boy with sharp green eyes and a face too pale for a peasant. Not a woman, not a wife. A stranger. Good, she thought. The forest will not recognize me as a woman. The enemy will see only another peasant boy trying to flee the war. She tied her hair into a tight knot at the nape of her neck, covered it with a woolen cap, and pulled the wolfskin cloak over her shoulders. Then she took the old dog, the one that had slept by the threshold for so many years, and stroked his grey muzzle. "Stay," she whispered. "Watch the house. I will return." The dog whined, as though he understood. He licked her hand, then lay down by the door, his eyes following her as she stepped out into the blinding white morning. The cold hit her like a physical blow. It was a deep, bone-aching cold, the kind that seeps into your marrow and makes your breath turn to ice before it even leaves your lips. The snow was up to her knees in places, and the path, what little of it existed, was buried under drifts that had not been disturbed since the men had marched. She walked. The first day was easy. She followed the river, which was frozen solid, its surface covered in a thick layer of snow. The tracks of the army were still visible here and there, broken branches, frozen horse dung, the imprint of a boot in the ice. She followed them north, toward the forest that loomed dark and shaggy on the horizon. At midday, she stopped to rest. She found a fallen log, cleared the snow from its surface, and sat down, chewing on a piece of dried meat. Her legs ached. Her feet were already beginning to blister inside Dobrynya's 2 large boots. But she forced herself to keep going. "He is waiting," she told herself. "He is waiting, and I am coming." She walked until the sun began to sink, painting the sky in shades of violet and blood. The forest was closer now. She could see the dark pines, the black silhouettes of oaks, the white birch trees standing like ghosts among the snow. And in the distance, she heard something that made her blood run cold. Howling. Wolves. They were far off, but they were coming closer. She could hear the pack moving through the trees, their yips and howls echoing in the frozen air. She quickened her pace, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her eyes scanning the forest for shelter. And then she saw them. 3 shapes, lean and grey, moving through the snow with a fluid grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. Their eyes glowed yellow in the fading light, their tongues lolled pink against white fangs. Varvara stopped. Her hand went to the knife at her belt, but she knew it was useless. 3 wolves, hungry and desperate, no knife could stop them. She would be torn apart before she could even draw it. But then she remembered something her mother had told her long ago when she was just a child. The wolves do not hunt those who are not afraid. Fear is blood, child. It calls them. But if you are still, if you are quiet, they will pass you by. So she stood still. She forced her heart to slow, her breathing to even. She looked at the wolves, not with terror, but with the calm of one who belongs to the forest, who is part of it, not an intruder. The alpha wolf stopped. It tilted its head, sniffing the air. Its yellow eyes fixed on her, studying her, measuring her. Then, slowly, it turned away. The other 2 followed, and within moments they had disappeared into the trees, leaving only their tracks in the snow. Varvara let out a long, shaking breath. Her legs felt weak. She leaned against a tree, pressing her forehead to the cold bark. "Thank you," she whispered to the forest. "Thank you for letting me pass." The wind sighed through the branches, as if answering her, and somewhere, deep in the woods, she heard a faint, almost human voice. "Come, child. Come deeper. I am waiting." She did not know who or what it was, but she was not afraid. She had passed the wolves' test. Now she must pass the forest's. Chapter 5. The Master of the Forest. She walked deeper into the woods, and the trees grew taller, their branches intertwining overhead to form a dark canopy that blocked out the sky. The snow was deeper here, soft and powdery, and every step sank her up to her thighs. The cold bit at her cheeks, her nose, her fingers, but she did not stop. The voice had spoken, and she followed it. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only minutes. Time moved strangely in the deep forest. The light faded, but it did not grow dark. Instead, the world seemed to thicken, to become more solid, more alive. The trees breathed, the snow whispered, and the wind carried not just cold, but words. Closer, closer. And then she saw it. It was not a man, not an animal, not a tree, but something between all 3. A figure, huge and shaggy, covered in bark and moss, its face hidden beneath a tangle of beard and leaves. It leaned against an ancient oak, its eyes gleaming like coals in the gloom, its long arms ending in claws that could have torn a bear apart. Varvara stopped. She had heard of this creature. Every child in the village had. But to see it, to stand before it in the flesh, was something else entirely. Leshy, she thought, the master of the forest. She bowed her head as one bows to an elder, to a keeper of ancient things. Goy esi, lord, she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her limbs. I am Varvara, daughter of Agrafena, healer of the village. I seek passage through your domain, and I come in peace. The creature stared at her. Its eyes narrowed, and it let out a sound that was half chuckle, half growl, like rocks grinding together deep underground. Peace, it said, and its voice was the rustle of dead leaves, the creak of ancient branches. You come in peace, little one. You come in peace, clad in a man's clothes, with a knife at your belt and a wolf's heart in your chest. Varvara swallowed. I come in need, Lord. My husband is at the war. The Livonians march on Chud Lake. I must reach him before it is too late. Too late? Leshy laughed, and the sound shook the snow from the branches above. Too late. All is too late. The ice is thick, and the blood will be thick as well. What can one woman do against an army of iron men, little healer? I do not know, she said honestly, but I must try. I made a vow, Lord, to love him and to follow him wherever he goes, even to the ice, even to the grave. Leshy was silent for a long moment. It tilted its head, studying her with those coal, bright eyes. Then it pushed off from the tree and stood to its full height, a mountain of moss and bark, so tall that its head brushed the lowest branches. You are brave, it said. Foolish, but brave. But courage alone will not get you through my forest. You must earn your passage, little healer. She nodded, feeling the weight of the words. What must I do? Leshy lifted its left leg, and she saw it then, a great splinter of wood, as thick as a man's thumb, driven deep into the creature's foot. The wound was old, infected. Pus and sap dripped from it, and the flesh around it was swollen and angry, the colour of rot. 70 years I have walked with this pain, Leshy said. 70 years I have carried this thorn in my foot, and no healer has been brave enough to approach me. Can you help me, little one? Or will you scream and run like all the others? Varvara looked at the wound. It was ugly, but not beyond her skill. She had treated worse in the village, men with axes buried in their legs, women with snake bites swelling their arms, children with fevers that burned like fire. This was just wood and infection. She could do this. I can help you, Lord, she said, but I will need 3 things: birch sap, clean moss, and a fire to boil my knife. Leshy's eyes widened in surprise. You would treat me? Now? Without trembling? I tremble inside, she admitted, but I will not let it stop me. You are in pain, Lord, and I am a healer. That is what I do. She set to work. First, she gathered dry twigs and dead branches, building a small fire in the snow. The birch sap she collected by scoring the bark of a nearby tree, a thin trickle of sweet, clear liquid that she caught in her leather flask. The moss she found beneath the roots of an old oak, soft and clean and white as milk. She boiled her knife in the flames until the metal glowed, then let it cool. And then, with steady hands, she began to work the splinter free. Leshy did not make a sound. It stood rigid as a statue, its massive hands gripping the trunk of the oak for support, as she probed the wound with her fingers, dug out the pus, and slowly, painstakingly, drew the great shard of wood from its foot. The splinter came free with a wet, sucking sound. Varvara dropped it into the snow and immediately pressed the moss against the wound, binding it with a strip of cloth torn from her own shirt. She poured the birch sap over the bandage, a natural antiseptic, as her mother had taught her. "It is done," she said at last, sitting back on her heels. "The wound will heal now. You must keep it clean, and in a month's time you will walk without pain." Leshy looked down at its foot, then at her. Its eyes were no longer coals. They were warm, almost golden, like the sun on a winter morning. "You have done what no other has dared," it said softly. "You have given me back my forest, little healer. For 70 years I have limped through my domain, and now I am free." It reached out with one huge, bark-covered hand and touched her forehead. She felt a warmth spread through her, a tingling sensation that began at the crown of her head and flowed down into her limbs, into her heart, into her very soul. "I give you a gift," Leshy said, "the hearing of the beasts. Now you will hear the whisper of the trees, the footsteps of the fox, the heartbeat of the hare beneath the snow. You will be part of my forest, little one, and the forest will protect you." Varvara felt the change immediately. The world around her became alive with sound. The creak of branches, the scurry of small paws beneath the snow, the distant howl of a wolf, the whisper of the wind through the pines. It was overwhelming, beautiful, terrifying. "Thank you, Lord," she breathed. Leshy smiled, a strange, crooked smile that showed teeth like old river stones. "Go," it said. "Follow the river north, but beware the deep water, little one. The old man is not as kind as I." Chapter 6. The River's Depths. She walked for another day, following the frozen river north. The forest thinned here and there, and she caught glimpses of the grey sky above, flat and heavy with snow. The wind picked up, bitter and sharp, and she pulled her wolfskin cloak tighter around her shoulders. Leshy's gift was still new, still strange. Every sound was amplified, every rustle a symphony. She heard the mice beneath the snow, the owls in the hollow trees, the distant cry of a hawk circling somewhere far above. It was like being blind and suddenly given sight, except she had always been able to see. Now she could hear. And at night, when she lay curled against a fallen log, she heard something else: the river. It was not a happy sound. The ice was thick, but beneath it, the water still moved, and that movement was angry. Something stirred in the deeps, something old and cold and very, very hungry. She woke with a start in the middle of the night. She had not meant to sleep. She was too cold, too afraid, but exhaustion had claimed her. Now she was awake, and she knew, with the certainty of a creature that has learned to listen, that she was not alone. The ice beside her cracked. She scrambled to her feet, her hand going to her knife. The river was a few feet away, its surface glittering in the dim starlight. And in that glittering surface, something moved. She saw a face. It was old, ancient, with a beard of green algae and eyes like the bottom of a deep well. The skin was pale, waterlogged, and where its mouth should have been, there was only a gaping hole full of sharp stones. Vodyanoi, the old man of the river. He rose from the water like a corpse, his long arms reaching for her, dripping ice and slime. His voice was the gurgle of drowning men, the whisper of rushing water over wet stones. "Pretty, pretty little thing," he croaked. "Come to me. Come to the deep water. Stay with me forever." Varvara backed away, her heart hammering in her chest, Her foot slipped on the ice, and she went down hard, the breath knocked from her lungs. The creature loomed over her, its wet fingers closing around her ankle, cold as death. "Release me!" she cried. "I am a healer. I mean you no harm." All harm, the Vodunoi hissed. "Men poison my water. They drown my fish. They throw their refuse into my home. I will drown you. I will drink your warmth." Varvara struggled, but the creature was strong, far stronger than any man. Its grip was like iron, and she felt herself being dragged toward the ice, toward the crack in the water where the dark depths waited. But then she remembered something. Her mother had told her about the Vodunoi. He was greedy, yes. Angry, yes. But he loved order. He loved offerings. He was a creature of bargains and debts. "Wait!" she shouted, reaching into her pouch. "I have something for you. A gift. An offering." The creature paused, its head cocked to one side. "Gift?" it gurgled. "What gift? What could you give me, little thing?" She pulled out the last piece of her dried bread, a small, hard crust, but it was the only food she had left. She held it up, her hand trembling. "Bread," she said, "fresh from the village oven. I offer it to you, old man, as a sign of peace. I mean you no harm. I am not like the others. I do not poison the water." The Vodunoi stared at the bread. Its mouth opened, that gaping hole of sharp stones, and it let out a sound that might have been a laugh. "Bread," it rumbled. "Bread for the old man. It has been 100 years since anyone offered me bread." It released her ankle and snatched the crust from her hand. It swallowed it whole, and Varvara saw something shift in its expression, a softening, a lessening of that ancient rage. "You are strange, little thing," it said. "You do not run. You do not scream. You offer gifts. What are you?" "I am Varvara," she said, scrambling to her feet. "A healer. I seek passage through your river. I go to Chud Lake to find my husband." "Chud Lake," the Vodunoi repeated, and its voice grew distant, dreamy. "Chud Lake is dark waters, little one. Dark and cold and full of blood. The Iron Men come. They will drown in the ice. They will drown, and the old man will drink their warmth." "Not my husband," she said firmly. "He will not drown. I will not let him." The Vodunoi looked at her, and in its ancient eyes she saw something like respect. "Strange creature," it said again. "You have not run. You have offered a gift. You speak to me as an equal. I will let you pass, little healer. And more, I will give you a gift of my own." It raised its wet hand and touched her mouth, the cold fingers pressing against her lips. "Take the breath of the deep," it whispered. "You can hold your breath for an hour. You can see in the dark of the water. You are no longer a woman of the land. You are part of the river now." Varvara gasped as the cold flooded her lungs, not drowning, but something else. A stillness, a calm. She felt as though she could hold her breath forever, as though the water was her home, not her enemy. "Thank you," she whispered. The Vodunoi smiled, a terrible, beautiful smile, full of stones and algae. Go, little one. And when you reach the ice, remember, the old man sees all. He knows all. He will be watching. Chapter 7. The Beast Council. She crossed the river at dawn, walking along the ice where it was thickest, watching the dark shapes of fish moving beneath her feet. The cold no longer bothered her. The Vodunai's gift had made her body strange, able to bear temperatures that would have killed a normal woman. She was no longer entirely human. But she did not care. She was closer now. She could feel it. The thread of her love for Dobrynya was stronger, brighter, pulling her north. She walked faster, her legs burning, her breath coming in short, sharp bursts. And then she heard them. Voices. 3 of them, moving through the trees ahead. Not human voices, the voices of animals. And thanks to Leshy's gift, she could understand them. "Run! Run! Run!" cried a small, panicked voice. "The foxes are coming! The foxes are coming!" "Fools, both of you," growled a deeper voice, sharp and clever. "The foxes are already here, and we are not your enemy, not today. The forest speaks, and the forest says, the healer approaches." "Who? Who approaches?" piped a third voice, high and piercing. "I see something. Something strange. A woman. A man. What is it?" Varvara stepped out of the trees and saw them. A hare, white as snow, trembling in the shadow of a fallen log. A fox, red and sleek, its tail twitching with impatience. And a hawk, perched on a high branch, its golden eyes fixed on her. "I am Varvara," she said, and the animals started at the sound of her voice. "I am the healer. I seek passage through your domain." The fox was the first to recover. It stepped forward, its head low, its eyes gleaming. "You understand us," it said. "You speak our tongue. No human has ever done that before." "Leshy gave me the gift," she said, "and the Vodunai. I am not like the other humans." "Clearly," the fox said, its whiskers twitching. "But we need proof. Proof that you are truly who you say you are." The test came quickly. The fox led her to its den, where 3 tiny cubs lay whining, their fur patchy and raw. They were sick, covered in mange, their skin red and weeping. "My children are dying," the fox said, and for the first time, Varvara heard sorrow in its voice. "They will not eat. They will not sleep. Can you help them?" Varvara knelt and looked at the cubs. They were not dying, not yet, but they would if the mange was left untreated. She knew the remedy, birch tar. It stank, but it worked. She scraped some of the tar from the bark of a nearby birch and mixed it with water, then gently rubbed it into the cub's skin. They whimpered, but they did not bite. And within minutes, their whining had stopped and they were sleeping peacefully. The fox stared at her, its sharp eyes wide with wonder. "You have saved my children," it said. "How can I ever repay you?" "Let me pass through your territory," she said, "and guide me safely through the forest." The fox nodded. "I will do more than that," it said. "I will teach you my cunning, the art of misdirection, of making your enemy believe one thing while you do another. You will need it at the ice, where the Iron Men are blind to such tricks." The hare was next. It led her to a clearing where its family lived. Dozens of hares, all white as snow, hiding in the long grass. But one of them was missing. A young buck, caught in a trap set by poachers. "He is suffering," the hare said, its small voice trembling with fear. "He cries all night. We cannot free him. The iron jaws are too strong." Varvara found the trap easily. a cruel device of metal and spring clamped tight around the buck's leg. The creature whimpered when she approached, but it did not try to bite her. "Hold still," she whispered. "I will free you, but you must be brave." She worked the jaws open with her hands, the spring resisting her strength. It took all her effort, but she was strong, stronger than she had been before, stronger than any normal woman. The trap snapped open, and the buck staggered to its feet, its leg bleeding but whole. The hares swarmed around her, their eyes bright with gratitude. "You are kind," the hare said. "You are gentle. The forest will remember you. I will give you my gift, the swiftness of my feet. No enemy will outrun you, little healer." And Varvara felt it, a lightness in her legs, a sudden power that made her feel as if she could race the wind itself. The hawk was the hardest. It sat on a high branch, its wing drooping at an impossible angle. It had flown too close to the battle. The army was already moving, the hawk had seen it, and a crossbow bolt had grazed its wing, breaking the bone. "I cannot hunt," the hawk said, its voice harsh with pain. "I cannot fly. I am useless. I would rather die." "No one is useless," Varvara said firmly. "You are a part of the forest, and the forest needs you. I can fix your wing, but you must trust me." She climbed the tree, a feat that would have been impossible a week ago, but with the hare's swiftness, she reached the branch in minutes. She took the hawk's wing gently in her hands, feeling the break, the dislocation. "Hold still," she said. "This will hurt." She snapped the bone back into place. The hawk screamed, a piercing cry that echoed through the forest. But Varvara did not let go. She bound the wing with a splint of birch bark and a strip of her own shirt, then held it steady until the hawk's trembling stopped. "You," the hawk gasped, "you have given me back the sky. I am in your debt, little healer." "Not a debt," she said, "a gift, freely given. But I ask for something in return, your sharp eyes. At the ice, I will need to see the Iron Men before they see me." The hawk nodded, its golden eyes glowing. "Take my sight," it said. "See the enemy from 100 versts away. See the snow, the ice, the blood that will be spilled. See everything, little one, and use it to save your love." Chapter 8. The Hut on Chicken Legs. The forest grew darker, stranger, as she walked deeper into its heart. The trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches like grasping hands. The snow was red in places, not with blood, but with rust, as though the earth itself was weeping iron. And the sounds were wrong. They echoed, rippled, came from no single direction. Varvara felt the weight of Leshy's gift pressing on her ears. She heard the whispers of the trees, and they were not friendly. They spoke of death, of hunger, of the great darkness that lives in the cracks between the world of the living and the world of the dead. Turn back, the wind whispered. "She is waiting. She is always waiting." But Varvara pushed forward. Her feet were sore, her body exhausted, but the thread of love still pulled her north. And then, through the twisted trees, she saw it. A hut. But not a normal hut. It stood on 2 huge chicken legs, its wooden walls covered in moss and carved with strange symbols. The roof was thatched, but the thatch was made of human hair, and the windows were dark as empty eye sockets. Smoke rose from the crooked chimney, grey and greasy, carrying with it the scent of burning bones. Baba Yaga, the old witch, the keeper of the boundary between worlds, the one that mothers used to frighten children into obedience, the one that only the bravest, or the most foolish, ever dared approach. Varvara stood before the hut and bowed. "Goi esi, grandmother," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her heart. "I come in peace. I seek passage through your domain." For a long moment, nothing happened. The wind howled, the trees creaked. And then, with a groan of ancient wood, the hut turned on its chicken legs to face her. The door swung open. Inside, the darkness was absolute. But from that darkness emerged a figure, a woman, so old she seemed more bone than flesh, with iron teeth and a nose that touched her chin. Her hair was white as snow, her skin wrinkled as dried bark, and her single good eye was the colour of a winter sky. "Goi esi to you too," the hag croaked, leaning on her pestle. "And what do we have here? A woman in a man's clothes walking through my forest, past the wolves and the river and the beast council. You must be either very brave or very stupid, little one." "Perhaps both," Varvara said with a small smile. "I am Varvara, a healer. I seek my husband at Chud Lake. The war is coming, and I must reach him." "Chud Lake?" Baba Yaga cackled, and the sound was like stones grinding together. "Chud Lake, where the ice will turn red and the dead will walk the shores for 100 years. You think you can save him, little healer? You think love is stronger than steel?" "I don't know," Varvara said honestly, "but I must try. If I don't try, I will have failed him before the first sword is even drawn." Baba Yaga studied her with that sharp, ancient eye, and then, slowly, she smiled, a terrible, iron-toothed smile. "You remind me of myself," she said, "when I was young, when I had a heart that still beat with love instead of hunger. Come inside, little one. There is a bath to be drawn, and I am too old to do it myself." Inside the hut was chaos. Bones hung from the rafters. Herbs, both dried and living, grew from the cracks in the walls. A great mortar and pestle stood in the centre of the room, filled with something that bubbled and hissed. And in the corner, a clay stove glowed with unnatural fire. Varvara did not hesitate. She drew water from the well outside, cold, clean water that tasted of iron, and heated it on the stove. She scrubbed the old woman's back with a cloth, cleaned the filth from her fingernails, washed the dried blood from her hair. "You are gentle," Baba Yaga said, and her voice was softer now. "Not like the others. They scream and run. They try to fight me. But you heal, you clean, you serve." "I was taught to serve," Varvara said. "My mother always said, the greatest magic is kindness. It will open doors that no sword can break." Baba Yaga laughed, but the laughter was kinder than before. "Your mother was wise," she said, "and you are her daughter. I will help you, little one. But I must tell you something first. The path to Chud Lake is guarded by death, not the death of the body, the death of hope. You will see your husband fall in 1,000 different ways, and each vision will try to break you. Can you bear it?" "I can," she said. "For him, I can bear anything." Baba Yaga nodded slowly. She reached under the stove and pulled out a sword. Ancient, beautiful, its blade of Damascus steel, its hilt wrapped in black leather. The sword seemed to hum with power. "Take this," she said. "It is called Cladinets. It was forged by the spirits of the earth before the first prince ruled the Rus. It will not break, little one. But remember, the sword is only a tool. True strength comes from the heart. And you have a strong heart, Varvara, stronger than you know." Varvara took the sword, and the moment her fingers closed around the hilt, she felt it. The weight of generations, the power of the earth itself. She felt as though she could cut through mountains. "Thank you, grandmother," she said. Baba Yaga touched her forehead with one gnarled finger. "Go," she said. "Follow the river north. You will reach the ice by sunset tomorrow. And when you are there, when you face the iron men and the blood and the death, remember, your love is the strongest force in any world. Let it guide your hand, and you will not fail." Varvara bowed deeply and stepped out of the hut. The door creaked shut behind her, and the hut turned on its chicken legs, slowly spinning, disappearing into the mist. She was alone again, but she was no longer afraid. Book 3. The Battle on the Ice. Chapter 9. The Field of the Dead. The sun rose cold and pale over the frozen lake. Varvara had been walking for 2 days, her feet bleeding inside her boots, her body aching with exhaustion. But she had made it. She had reached Chud Lake, the place where the armies would meet, the place where Dobrynya's fate would be decided. She crept through the reeds at the edge of the lake, her hawk's eyes scanning the horizon. The army was there, thousands of men on both sides, drawn up in formation on the ice. The knights of the Livonian order stood in a wedge, their white cloaks stark against the grey sky, their iron armour gleaming like the scales of a dragon. Behind them, the Estonian auxiliaries, poorly armed but numerous. And on the other side, the Rus. Prince Alexander's men, the Novgorodians and the Vladimirites, their banners fluttering in the bitter wind. She saw them clearly, the spearmen in the centre, the archers on the flanks, the heavily armoured Dobrynya waiting in reserve. And somewhere among them, she knew, was Dobrynya. She moved closer, using her fox's cunning to avoid the scouts, her hare's swiftness to dart between cover. The hawk's gift showed her everything, the nervous horses, the sweating men, the grey faces of the Estonians who did not want to fight. The wind carried the sounds to her, the clank of armour, the murmur of prayers, the distant shout of a commander. And then the battle began. The knights advanced in their wedge, the pig formation, as the Rus called it. Heavy cavalry, impossible to stop, their lances lowered, their horses' hooves thundering across the ice. The Rus archers loosed their arrows, and they fell like rain. But the knights' armour held, and the arrows bounced off like so many twigs. The wedge crashed into the Rus centre, and the screaming began. Varvara ran. She had no plan, only the desperate need to find her husband before it was too late. She ran through the chaos, past dying men and fallen horses, past the blood and the snow, and the terrible, relentless clang of steel. And then she saw him. He was at the heart of the battle, surrounded by 3 knights. His sword was broken. The blade had snapped in 2, and he was fighting with only a jagged shard. His face was covered in blood, his mail was torn, and he was stumbling, barely able to stand. But he was alive. "Dobrynya!" she screamed. He heard her. Even through the chaos, even through the screaming and the clashing of arms, he heard her. His eyes met hers, and she saw the recognition there, the shock, the fear, the desperate hope. "Varvara, run!" he shouted. "It's too late!" But she did not run. She drew the sword cladinets, the steel of the earth, the gift of Baba Yaga, and she charged into the fray. The first knight fell before he knew what hit him. She was too fast. The hare's swiftness made her a blur, and the fox's cunning made her unpredictable. She ducked under his swing, sliced through the straps of his armour, and drove her blade into the gap between his breastplate and helm. He collapsed without a sound. The second knight turned, his eyes wide with shock. She saw him raise his sword, saw the moonlight of his steel streaking toward her head. She dodged. The hawk's sight showed her the exact path of his blade, and she thrust upward, under his guard, into his throat. He fell beside his comrade. The third knight was already moving toward Dobrynya, his sword raised for the death blow. Varvara screamed, throwing herself forward, her blade extended like a lance. She caught him mid-swing, her sword cutting through his arm, his chest, his breastbone. He toppled like a felled tree. And then she was kneeling beside Dobrynya, her hands pressing against his wounds, trying to stop the flow of blood. "I came," she whispered. "I came for you, my love. I told you I would." His face was pale, his eyes fluttering open and closed. He reached up and touched her cheek with a bloody hand. "Varvara," he breathed. "My Varvara, you should not have come. You should not have—" "I would follow you to the end of the world," she said. "And we are not at the end yet." The battle raged around them, but she did not see it. She only saw his face, his pale, dying face. And then she heard it, the crack of the ice. It was faint at first, like a distant drum, but it grew louder, deeper, more urgent. The lake beneath them was groaning, the ice splitting under the weight of so many armoured men and horses. The knights were retreating, or trying to, but the ice was breaking beneath them, and they were falling into the dark water, drowning in their iron shells. "Get up," she said, pulling Dobrynya to his feet. "We have to move, now!" Chapter 10. The Road Home. She dragged him through the chaos, away from the battle, away from the broken ice and the drowning men. His weight was crushing. He was twice her size, and he could barely stand. But she was strong. The gifts of the forest had made her strong. She pulled, carried, dragged him across the ice, over the bodies, through the snow. And then they were in the forest. The trees closed around them, muffling the sounds of the battle, hiding them from the enemy. She found a hollow beneath a great oak and laid him down, her hands working frantically to stop the bleeding. "There is a puncture in his lung," she muttered, her healer's eyes seeing what the hawk's sight could not. "The air is escaping. If I don't seal it, he will suffocate." But before she could work, a bear stepped out of the trees. It was massive, ancient, its fur white with frost, its eyes as black as a winter night. Varvara reached for her sword, but the bear did not attack. It stood there, watching her, and then it whined, a low, pained sound that made her heart ache. She saw it then, an arrow, buried deep in the bear's shoulder. The wound was festering, angry, leaking pus and blood. "You are hurt," she said, "and you came to me for help." The bear made a sound that might have been affirmation. She hesitated. She had no time. Dobrynya was dying, and every moment counted. But if she did not help the bear, she would never make it out of the forest alive. The bear was the only way. She made a decision. She pulled the arrow free. The bear did not move, though she felt its muscles tense beneath her hand, and bound the wound with moss and birch sap. The bear rumbled its thanks, its massive head bowing low. "Now," she said, "I need your help. My husband is dying. I need to get him home." The bear nodded. It pushed her aside gently, hoisted Dobrynya onto its broad back with surprising care, and began to move through the forest. They travelled for days. The bear carried Dobrynya as if he were a child, its powerful legs carrying them through the snow and the darkness. Varvara walked beside them, her hand always on the bear's fur, guiding them through the paths only the forest knew. At night, she tended Dobrynya's wounds. The puncture in his lung was closing, slowly, but the infection was spreading. She used everything she had, the herbs from her pouch, The skills her mother had taught her, the gifts of the forest that allowed her to feel his pain and share it. "He will live," she told the bear. "He will live. I will not let him die." Chapter 11. The Healing. They reached the village on the 5th day. The bear carried Dobrynya to the door of Varvara's izba and then disappeared into the forest, its work done. Varvara dragged her husband inside, laid him on the bed, and began the real work. She boiled water, she cleansed the wounds, she stitched the torn flesh. She pressed poultices to his chest, his side, his arms. She mixed tinctures of willow bark and chamomile and fed them to him drop by drop. For 3 weeks she did not sleep. She sat by his side, watching the rise and fall of his chest, listening with her hair's ears to his heartbeat, feeling with her healer's hands for any sign of danger. She fed him, bathed him, changed his bandages, and slowly, painfully, he began to heal. Epilogue. The son of the falcon, 1 year later. A year later, a child was born. He was a boy, dark-haired and green-eyed, with a cry that could wake the dead. Varvara held him in her arms, and Dobrynya sat beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "He has your spirit," he said, "and your strength." "And your courage," she replied. "He will be a great warrior someday." Dobrynya shook his head. "No," he said. "He will be a healer, like his mother. That is the greater power, the power that saves life, not the one that takes it." He looked at her, his eyes full of gratitude and love. "I am sorry, Varvara," he said. "I laughed at you once. I thought your herbs and charms were foolish. I thought I was the strong one. But you walked through fire to save me. You spoke to wolves and demons and the very earth itself. You are the strongest person I have ever known." Varvara leaned her head against his shoulder. "I am not strong," she said. "I am only loving." The tale spread through the village and then through the land. They called her the wife who walked through winter, the healer who spoke with beasts. She became a legend, a figure of hope for wives whose husbands went to war. But Varvara never saw herself as a legend. She saw herself only as a woman who had loved, and who had followed that love to the ends of the earth. And that, perhaps, was the greatest magic of all. To Save Her Lord, a novel of Ancient Rus. Author, Anna Gogoleva. Year, 2026. Author's moral message. True strength never lies in a blade or in armor. It lives in a heart that is capable of loving so fiercely that it walks through deadly frost without looking back. It grows in hands that do not kill but heal, and in a soul that does not demand reward for kindness. The forest, the river, the beasts, and even death itself bow before those who come with peace and courage. And in the end, it is not the warrior who triumphs, but the one who knows how to wait, to believe, and to bring back to life. For the greatest miracle is not a sword forged by spirits, but a love that knows no bounds. Copyright notice. Copyright 2026, Anna Gogoleva. All rights reserved. No part of this work may be reproduced, distributed, or used in any form without the author's written permission.